Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer, and today we're going to have a very topical and very invigorating episode today about the biggest news that's happened over the week. Obviously, we're going to be talking about the latest Iran strikes that have killed Ayatollah Khamenei and many other senior leaders, and has now led to direct conflict with America and Israel. So we're going to be discussing this as we got three different takes, or three different questions on this from Gillis and Joyer, Nitro, and K-Max. Wondering if I can Greer pill them or, turn on the president. Well, Gillis and Joyer seems to like the strike, so we will... So some different opinions here. So my opinion on the strikes is primarily wait and see. In terms of like whether we panic or even turn on Trump or what our motivations are. I generally, as I said with the strikes over the summer, the 12-day war, I'm not a fan of them. I don't think that this is the best way to go about things. I don't think that there's a proper plan in place for the strikes. It's unclear what they want. At first they're like, well, we're fighting for the people on the streets of Iran and for regime change. And it's clear that this isn't spurring regime change, at least not in the type that they want. They've now pared down their goals to saying, we want to make a deal where they don't have nukes and they're neutralized as a threat. I guess that's more realistic, but we'll see. And in some ways, they seem to have moved to what their strategy was for Maduro, where they take out Maduro and hope someone more amenable and more moderate takes over. And this is someone they can work with, which I think is fairly realistic. We need to get on our points on Iran. Iran, we are driven to this in large part by Israel. That is unquestionably true. Said Israel's the one who's been wanting to push us, wanting to do us. This is why we got involved in the 12-day war. But it's still in our interest to prevent Iran from having a nuclear war. We really don't want more countries having a nuclear weapons, or nuclear war. I meant nuclear weapons. Pretty much the only country I could think that maybe we'd be okay with is Germany or some other European countries. But the fact is that the vast majority of Germans would probably oppose to them even having nuclear weapons. They automatically eliminated their nuclear energy. Why would they adopt this dangerous weapon that they already have a hesitancy around any type of military force? I mean, yes, they're trying to build up their militaries and other things in Europe, but they're going against a culture of pacifism that naturally took over following the devastation of World War I and World War II. And so they're not as eager to get into this. Even though Germany is now saying they want to get involved or help out America in this. I guess this is to get brownie points with our country and help out Merz. Britain is all over the place with this because they've got military bases in the Mediterranean that are getting struck at. So they are having Britain is trying to say, well, we're not helping. Keir Starmer had this very bizarre video statement where he's like, we are not involved in this. Please stop trying to strike us. And they're not there, but apparently Germany is eager or interested in getting involved. Granted, I saw this from an RT headline, so take that with a grain of salt. But in any case, back to the main point of nuclear weapons, we don't want anyone in the Middle East to have nuclear weapons. Israel shouldn't have nuclear weapons, but guess what? They already have them. We are not going to go to war to attack Israel. Now, I think we should apply diplomatic pressure into limiting their nuclear supply in the same way that we've tried to limit the nuclear supply or make arms deals or arms reduction deals with Russia and other nations, but they haven't. And we don't want any more countries to have nukes. Pakistan shouldn't have nukes either. And guess what? They have nukes. Once they have nukes, that's a problem for us because this nuclear proliferation is a threat to American interests. You don't know, these aren't the most stable countries. This can always fall into the wrong hands. Or, maniacs could take over the country and then start firing nukes, at us or anywhere. And we don't want anyone to use nukes in the world. So it is a purpose that we don't want nuclear proliferation. And we especially don't want in the hands of an anti-American regime. Is that some people on our side, I made this point, I'm going to have an article tomorrow about this, about not being Jane Fonda. where people, whenever there's a foreign policy conflict, we immediately start siding with the foreign power that's hostile to America. We become, and for lack of a better term, people just embrace being a traitor. And yeah, and this is not an argument to support the strikes. As I said at the beginning, I'm not a fan of them. But my main thing is to wait and see over what happens here, because I have seen enough of these foreign policies, of us having these temporary foreign interventions, and they turn out to be not that big of a deal. Now, this is a much bigger deal than what's happened before, but if you look at the 12 days where, we're all predicting these massive retaliations and that America is going to really suffer from this, and pretty much everyone has forgotten about it, or at least the general voters have forgotten about it. And it didn't have any repercussions for America. And the same happened with the bombings in Syria during the first Trump term. This has also happened with the Venezuela raid, where everyone's predicting, this is the end of American hegemony and blah, blah, blah. This is going to have huge ramifications, and it's been a huge win for America. So I've seen time and time again that we've had these people claim we're going to have World War III, American empire is going to fall because we just killed our leader, and I'm taking a wait-and-see approach on this. Trump has given a month timeline for this. We'll see if that is the case. I mean, they're trying to end this as quickly as possible. If it ends in a week, and Iran makes a deal, then it is a win for the Trump administration. I still don't think this is the way to have gone about it. I think that this is a bit reckless to try to kill the Ayatollah and have targeted strikes. But in any case, this isn't, Iran is not a friend of America. Iran is an enemy of America. And you shouldn't be siding with an insane Islamic country that is ruled by the biggest bunch of morons on planet Earth. Imagine if our country was ruled by the kind of lowest brow evangelical pastors, along with completely insane, war-hungry ROTC graduates. Now, some people might think this is awesome. And their whole mission and their whole society has been built on these really aggressive military interventions that they have trouble paying for, and leaves their economy in shambles, and their people mad at that they don't have any money, and that they have a broken economy, and everything things suck in Iran, and they all want to leave. And that they're obsessed with veils and all this other nonsense that is deep. Now, that's their country. That's their business. I don't care how they rule themselves. It's not America's job to impose liberal democracy. And I fully oppose nation building and us trying to implement liberal democracy there. It's why I'm very skeptical of the idea of regime change, which we'll go into a moment. But Iran is ruled by these, insane fanatics, both with the IRGC that are extremely anti-Western, want to have extreme aggressive military interventions all over the world while their people are not doing well economically. And then they have these clerics who are obsessed with what women are wearing rather than proper economic policy and proper government policy. So it's a retarded country where their president gets flown into a mountain because they have lost they've had massive brain drain, and they no longer have competent pilots. And so they end up with these embarrassments where Israel is able to carry out assassinations within its country. Even the 12-day war is an embarrassment, where they can't even properly protect their supreme leader. This might not be as big of a win for America as we might imagine. It might prove to be a very bad move for us, but this is not going to be like Iran wins. When your supreme leader and most of your leaders are immediately taken out in the first 30 seconds of a military campaign, this is not a win for you. This is a massive embarrassment. Now, they may compensate this by making America and Israel pay a price, but Iran is not going to be a winner in this struggle. because they are embarrassed. And also in a lot of their strikes, they're further isolating themselves from the Gulf states by having these strikes. It's not like the Gulf states are like, wow, we're now going to be friendlier with Iran. And they depend, a lot of their food supply depends on UAE and some of these other people that they're attacking. So this is not going to be a win for them, but they want to make us pay a price. And that might happen, and we might not have the victory that we have, but they're not going to come out with a victory where our Iranians aren't. And people just want to imagine that, like, if you kill our leader, we win. It's like all the people when, they were killing these Hamas leaders. It's like Hamas just won because they got eliminated. No, you don't win by having your leaders continually eliminated. People even made this when Hezbollah's leadership got wiped out. That's not how these things work. Okay, but apparently the more times you lose and lose your leaders, the more times you win. So Iran's just going to keep winning. But hey guys, Iran is a country where anti-Americanism forms core part of their ideology. It is not, yes, they are anti-Israel, but they view Israel as our lackey and as an implement of the American empire, which there'd probably be some disagreements over how that relationship works. And a lot of the hatred towards Israel is seeing it as a lackey of America. We are the great Satan in their ideology. And we have limited ways to negotiate them with. Like, people are like, we should be their friend. I don't think we should try to force them to do regime change or do a lot of these unnecessary military actions, but they're never going to be your friend unless there was a new government in place. Like, this is a country where Mark Bar America is their rallying slogan. This is not a death to America is not going, the country that proclaims death to America and its like founding myth of the Islamic Republic is taking the American hostages and helping Hezbollah blow up Marines in Lebanon and take Americans, kidnap Americans and even torture some of them to death in Lebanon, and then help blow up American soldiers in Iraq, during the Iraq War. This is not going to be a friend of ours, and they don't have an intention of being our friend. And we've tried. We're going to have a podcast later this week on the American Iran's relationship, but there have been attempts to try to do that, and it hasn't worked. So this is not a friend of us. And they're deeply, Khomeini was influenced by Frantz Fanon and a lot of these anti-Western, anti-white thinkers, very anti-colonialist. People are like, oh, he just got into George Floyd because of the, as propaganda. No, but he generally believes this stuff. This is what influences ideology. Anti-colonialism, anti-Westernism, anti-Americanism is inherent to the Islamic Republic. And a lot of guys just decide, like, that's awesome because they immediately turn into wanting to burn American flags. But these are right-wingers, so they're never going to do anything in real life. This is all just internet LARPing as they're hiding in their room from their parents or their Filipino wife. And then they get to play some character. It's like World of Warcraft here. And they get to play this character and, like, death to America and everything. And then they go about to their menial job and get bullied by their supervisor. So this is, they're not going to actually take to the streets on this. I don't even think anyone's going to really take to the streets on this. Despite the internet, one weird thing about this is that you see, and I don't think this is a good thing, I'm just saying this is an observation, is that you're seeing the entire internet get fixated on this and is very upset about this. And I think it is an important issue and it's a deep concern. But you're not seeing anyone take to the streets yet to protest. The only people who took to the streets were the Iranian diaspora to support it. Now, that's not saying that there's a lot of support for it, but I'm just saying is that the deep level of care that Americans have would reflect in large-scale protests. When the Iraq War was in the stages of being prepared and launched, there were very large-scale demonstrations against it all across the country, and especially at college campuses. Are we going to see any large-scale demonstration against this latest military strike? I doubt it, because even with something like Palestine, where there's been large-scale protests, they have found a deeply interested group to provide that, and it's largely been Muslim immigrants. Now, there have, of course, been Americans who have joined up with the Palestinians, but in the Palestine-Israel issue, there are people with deep connection to the countries involved, and those are the people who are leading the protests. Now, others have joined. I don't think many Americans have joined the Israel ones, but there's been a number of Americans who have. But it's led by Muslims, largely Muslim immigrants who deeply care about this issue or have a connection to Palestine or surrounding areas. With Iran, the only people with a deep connection to this are the Iranian diaspora, and they're all for it, which I don't think that's an argument in its favor, but I'm just saying that's who's out there protesting. It was even similar to the Ukrainian protests, where when we're backing Ukraine, and then the people who are primarily marching and demonstrating are Ukrainians themselves, the Ukrainian diaspora in America. And then the one time they had a opposition war protest against it that was hosted by people aligned with Russian interests, it was a complete clown show of like a few hundred people who are all like conspiracy theorists. So it's like even here with the with the Iran war demonstration, I don't know if we're even going to have it. There were demonstrations in America over the Soleimani strike in 2020. This is right before COVID. This is January, February of 2020. And there were some protests. Right-wingers did, like a handful of right-wingers tried to join, and they were kicked out of the protest because they didn't want any Nazis there. So I don't think any of the people who are, posting online about death to America or whatever are going to take any type of action. It's just going to be internet posting. Or they're not going to actually burn an American flag. But it looks bad when our whole side is just immediately relishing, aircraft carrier being sunk and like Zog bots dying. And no one's going to pay attention to traitors. No one has respect for the traitors with that traitor mindset. It was even with the North Vietnamese, where Westerners and Americans would come there and visit them and talk with them, and they'd entertain them and all the things. But they, at the end of the day, looked down on these people and had no respect for them, even though these people were helping them, because they saw them as traitors to their own country. And there's not going to be anyone who is won over by these appeals. So when you're opposing the strikes, you have to remember that you're still an American. You should still support America. You should want the best for America. And you are not fantasizing about Zog bots drowning in the Gulf. So I don't know why people are on this, but there's a lot of people on it. People will say, like, there's no one saying this. And then, like, there'd be, like, 5 commenters saying these same things when people are saying it. And I'm finding plenty of right-wing influencers are saying that. There's even been a guest on my show, I won't name, who has been having a crash out over this and has been posting really grotesque fantasies about conservatives and traitors. And by traitors is people who support America, of like facing like castration and watching their children being like brutally murdered in front of them just for the sin of a foreign leader dying. And this is this is not appealing to anyone. So it's like with what it said, if you oppose this, if you don't want America to have these strikes, you don't turn into full Jane Fonda, begin waving foreign countries and other things, because then people don't pay attention to you. But it's really just something for internet malcontents, and it's boosted by bots and foreign actors. It's not likely any Americans are into this, but unfortunately a lot of our side, gets into this matter. Now, off the side of internet discourse, onto these strikes, of what's going to be the public reaction to this. And I made this point is that there's been American casualties. They announced this morning that there's been 4 American deaths. That might change a calculation that has happened. But in prior military operations, where we warned that are going to cause World War III or whatever, there have been no American casualties, and there's been no real cost for Americans. And if there is no real cost to Americans, 4 is, right or wrong, is probably not a number that is going to really greatly upset Americans. Now, that changes with the more that die. And the administration is making a rather uncomfortable statement that there are going to be more casualties, and how many more is something that's going to be a problem. I would say if there's 100 deaths, that's going to be a major problem for the administration. At least it could be fewer, But if you have 100 deaths, that's probably when Americans are going to be upset. I would say that that's the bar. It might happen earlier, but I would say that would be a guarantee of it. And so that's going to be a midterm issue, and that's going to be very problematic for Trump trying to get his administration agenda forward. And also, we have 100 Americans dead, which we obviously don't want that. And it's hard, and it's, if Americans don't feel that these were justifiable deaths or for a cause that they supported, that's going to be a huge problem for us. And it's also that the administration's having a tough time communicating this to the public, because first it's like we're defending freedom and democracy for the Iranian people, and then we don't have the intended result of these people rising up against the regime. We may have pockets. There was explosions going off in the Kurdish part of Iran. The Kurds might rise up, but that might be a problem. But I guess that would be something, that they are people rising up. They first said it's freedom, democracy. Then they're saying it was a preemptive attack against Iran trying to strike American interests. Maybe that was the case. I mean, it could be revenge for the 12-day war. I mean, I'm a bit skeptical of it, but it's not totally unbelievable. And then they're wanting to say we want to ensure that Iran is neutralized as a threat and is not going to have nukes, which I guess is in our interest, but the way we're going about it might not be the best way to accomplish that. And there's reports that the Iranians were willing to make a nuclear deal. I don't know how true that is. We'll have to see later on how it is, but I think it would have been better for diplomacy to achieve these means. But they've decided that they wanted to drastically hit the Iranian regime, and that's how it is there. But with regime change, that's a terrible idea, because one, the mullahs and IRGC aren't going to really go away without a fight. And it's really primarily controlled by the IRGC now, which the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is a bit more secular, is not really that invested with the veils policy and all these things. And they're still, committed Shia believers, but they're more focused on building up Iran as a serious power within the region, and striking against Israel, and pushing out America and Israel from the region, and having greater power for Iran. It's not as interested in spreading their particular form of Shia Islam. It recognizes Shia Islam as a useful form of soft power for the regime to spread its message and to defend and to gather allies who are fellow Shiites, such as the Shiites in Lebanon, the Houthis, Shiites in Pakistan, and Iraq, and especially in Iraq. And so they developed it. And then there's the mullahs, which from most of what I read from both books I've read and articles, is the mullahs have been, with the exception of Khamenei, who's now dead, have been pushed out and controlling government affairs. It's primarily IRGC, which is more hardline than the mullahs. And so that presents a problem with us. But in some ways, you might think the IRGC could be more sensible, because they're basing these more on secular, practical matters, but at the same time, they're more firmly committed to an aggressive posture towards America and Israel, and so they might be harder to negotiate with. And they're not going to go away. And the only way you could have a regime change is that there is some, which Trump, I hope that Trump didn't fully believe this, he just said this, is that he believed that, Khamenei dies and then they're going to topple the government. They were falling for these protest videos where they're like, oh, they set some ministry on fire. And it's like, oh, they're on their last legs. Apparently they're not on their last legs at all. And that even if they, say Khamenei or somebody had to leave, the government had to leave, the IRGC isn't just not going to disappear overnight. They're going to fight to the finish. And also, they might rally the Persian ethnic majority to their side when they see all the ethnic minorities, such as the Azeris and the Kurds, rise up and try to declare independence or separate from the rest of the country. So it would likely, regime change would likely to lead to civil war, probably cause a migrant crisis, is not something we want. I think that their new idea of just moving to more amenable leaders is more realistic, and it might work. If they make a deal, this is a win for Trump, but it's a very risky move. And there might be a chance that Trump's a bit over his skis. We'll have to see, but I think it's wait and see on this. We're going to talk about this more on Wednesday. We'll have more of an opinion there. But I think it is more proper to wait and see on this matter. I think it's fine to oppose the strikes. I think people are I'm more on the side of being strongly skeptical of the strikes. But I've been through this enough to have a wait and see approach, because Soleimani thing, people are like, World War III is going to happen, Iran's going to really hurt us. Nothing happened. The Syria strikes, nothing happened. The 12-day war, nothing happened. Even a lot of the stuff that's been on Gaza war, and there's always been this talk over there's going to be World War III from Russia, and that's not happened. And a lot of these things that are, and it's hard to get fully accurate information over what's happening. On X, you imagine that the American government's about to fall, that actually, in fact, that Iran's about to take over the entire Middle East, and America's about to fall, and Trump's going to have to go into hiding somewhere. That's clearly not true. But that's what you hear on X, and it's hard to find accurate information. I remember enough from the opening weeks of the Russia-Ukraine war, where there was all this bullshit flying around, and there was no accurate picture to be found. And today, it's even harder to find accurate information on it, because X is full of bullshit and AI videos and old videos from like 2020. I tweeted out a video that I thought, because it's from RT. Last time I'm tweeting, I would say it's the last time I'm tweeting out RT video, but RT's putting out a lot of content. And, as all these protesters gathered to mourn the Ayatollah. It turned out the video's from 2024, but there's still been large demonstrations in Iran in favor of the slain Ayatollah. In any case, that's like you're having to deal with. And Telegram's much more unusable today than it was in 2022. The media is, gathering what information they can, but we really don't have a good picture of what's going on. And so I think it's better to wait and see what happens. I don't think you need to go on and cheer on this strike. I don't think you need to side with Iran. I don't think you should absolutely not side with Iran. You shouldn't side with an anti-white, anti-Western, retarded regime from the third world that, has killed many Americans. There's no reason to sympathize with them just because they hate Israel. You can still oppose Israel. Just because you oppose Israel and you criticize Israel and you want America's relationship with Israel to change does not mean you need to side with Iran or any of the other enemies of Israel. That aside, you don't need to do that. And I don't like how people are automatically going into this and like saying that this is this is another reason to be anti-Trump. And it's, at the end of the day, is that I still stand by my position of people are wanting to say, like, how can we support Trump? It's like, Trump is still our only option, our only political option. And when people say, oh, that's not true, once we drop him, we'll have plenty of options. Like who? Who the fuck are we going to have? Even some people have suggested people in the admin. Rubio and Vance are just as tied to this as them. Some people want people outside of it. Who the fuck do you want? Massey? Marjorie Taylor Greene? Like, these are complete clowns. There's no serious alternative to Trump who is yet to emerge. If there was a serious alternative, like I would even say if we had the Britain option, I'm a bit skeptical of Rupert Lowe and Restore's chances of winning elections. I still think the best chances are with reform, but I know there's problems with reform. It's not my country, so I'm not telling Brits who to vote for. But I think even if the case, if you did have, a Rupert Lowe figure to rally behind and to vote, if there was like a serious Republican senator you could imagine as emerging as the, non-Trump alternative, then you could go with that. But right now we've got Ted Cruz, DeSantis, and these are people outside the admin. Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't even know if Bannon's going to run, because Bannon is going to have to run on the people most committed to Epstein while having a personal relationship with Epstein. a closer relationship with Epstein than Trump did, at least after the his conviction. Trump had very minimal interaction with Epstein after his first conviction, and meanwhile, like Epstein, Bannon is like a chief PR guy. So I don't know what you want. There's not, for Americans, there's not an alternative, and you want things to end up successfully. Now, if this thing ends up a disaster, that's not just bad for Trump, where it's like, okay, we slog off Trump, now we can advance. No, this also brings us down, because our fortunes are tied with Trump, whether we like it or not. No matter if you're critical of him, no matter if you're supportive of him, the online rights fortunes are tied with Trump. As if Trump fails, that doesn't somehow benefit someone who's more far right, because the public perception in that of Republican institutions, conservative institutions, is what went wrong with Trump was he's too right wing. Might have been the Iran strike, but it's going to be, we need a more reasonable classic conservative to come in. We need someone like Ted Cruz, and that's going to be your real alternative. It's not going to be super right wing base guy. It's going to be Ted Cruz type. That's what's going to be the anti-Trump alternative so far. So you want this to not turn into a disaster. You want this to end up being another thing like the Venezuela raid, where it's reasonably successful. You have a negotiation, Iranians make a deal, Trump gets the win, and we move on. And as long as that's what happens, the casualties are kept to a minimum, and Americans don't really pay a heavy price for it. Now, if not only with heavy casualties, if there's long gas lines and a major oil disruption, and Americans gas prices go through the roof, that could be an issue. That's why it's wait and see on what to determine with the matter. But I think it's that there's a rush to just think that Trump's the worst and that we don't want this. But I think the ultimate matter for why we need to be skeptical, I am ameliorated to an extent that they're no longer seem as eager to do regime change, is that it's more about these particular objectives. Regime change is terrible for American interests because it's going to lead to a civil war, destabilize the region, and that. Some people have been making the point that are very much worried about further strengthening Israel, which, that's also a problem in itself, is especially if Israel feels that we can just be called on to do whatever they want. We're trying to have good relations with the new government in Syria so they can take in migrants and, stabilize the region. But sometimes Israel seems to want to overthrow them so they can have complete chaos there because they feel that's in their interest. That's not the case. I mean, the one thing, if you're worried about Israel controlling the Middle East, is that there's still Turkey and the Gulf states, which are not controlled by Israel, and it still present problems for Israel. It's why Israeli leaders are now talking about Turkey, but Turkey is not Iran. Turkey is going to be, it's part of NATO. It's not going to go away. They can't really do the same things against Turkey that they could do against Iran. And I think it's necessary to have other countries stand as bulwarks to Israel, because Israel acts like Iran. They also act insane on the world stage. So you do want them hemmed in to keep them in check. You don't want Israel controlling the entire Middle East, but you still have the Turkey and the Gulf states there to prevent that. So but I think if you did have it's not in our interest to have another Syrian civil war erupt in Iran, because that could spread all over. That's going to spread into Pakistan. That's going to spread into Iraq. It's going to spread potentially into Turkey. It's going to cause problems for, there could be some maniacs who are there and then they try to block all oil supplies coming from the Middle East or do something. And then there's a migrant crisis that comes up. There's a lot of things we want to prevent. But I think keeping some stable regime in there that's more willing to work with us, that's a fine objective to have. But I am skeptical that strikes are the way to achieve that. But we'll wait and see. If they do achieve that, we get a deal. That's it. It is what it is. So now it's going to stand as another win for Trump, and we can move on and focus on the primary issues that we care about. But if it doesn't, then things are bad. And it's not going to be as easy for us to extricate ourselves by simply saying we're turning on Trump and then we're going to go vote for Democrats. That's not going to help the online right whatsoever. That we are going down with the ship no matter what. Or we're going to be negatively affected by that ship, by the Trump ship going down regardless. And if the Democrats win and take power in 2028 or in 2026, this is not going to be good for the online right. Even if we think that it sends a message to Republicans, the message it's going to send to Republicans is that it's time to get rid of Trump and the right-wing elements he's brought in and to return back to the Paul Ryan era of the GOP. That's why you don't want... So I think it's fine. Whatever positions I think it's necessary to... If you're criticizing Trump's strikes, that's perfectly legitimate. I don't think people should be attacking each other on the strikes. I sympathize with that view. I think I have a certain leeriness to this. I think skepticism is warranted. It's too early to be cheerleading and saying this is a success. It's wait and see approach. But I think the most important thing is that our side, the online right, needs to stop turning into traitors and stop admiring these crappy governments, whether it's Assad, he got taken out in a week of operation and then fled to Russia. Not a hero. At least with Khomeini, he died, in his own country and meeting, that is, I guess, a way to sympathize with him. I'm not going to turn him to a hero because he hated, he was an enemy of us. That doesn't mean we need to wage war on him, but I'm not going to see him as an ally. And then people want to celebrate North Korea or Maduro is even more of a villain and more of an enemy to American interests than even Khomeini is. So our direct, because it's in our backyard. Iran is at least not in our backyard. So the most important point is that for us to remember, most of our listeners are American. We are Americans. We want the best for our country. We're not gonna, LARP and pretending we're now flag burners and throwing up the Iran flag or anything of that sort. We're standing with our country. We want the best for our country. We do not want American servicemen to die. And I think with whatever your stance on the strikes is, you admire that. So if for guys who are supporting the strikes and saying 100 Americans are necessary to die for these objectives, I think that's a reason to call them out and say that you shouldn't be doing that. And it's the same with those who, relish that idea to bring down the American empire or something. But there's far more people within our sphere who are relishing the idea of thousands of Americans of our Zog bots dying to advance their petty concerns. I guess we can finally test the thesis that if a foreign power sinks an American aircraft carrier, that the American Constitution requires us to give power to podcasters, but we'll see if that happens. But I think with the final conclusion, Mark, is how Americans are going to react. They're not going to care about this unless it affects their life. So if we begin to have gas lines, if a lot of Americans come home dead, then they will care, and this will be very bad for Trump, and it will affect the midterms. If none of that happens, it's not going to affect the midterms. We can even see this there was this very important bit of news this week where I think it was ABC or CBS, one of the major networks, they cut from a hockey game to announce the news of Khomeini's death. This is a major world leader, okay? This is important news. And hockey fans were livid that they cut to this news. And I think that explains how Americans are reacting to this. And they've reacted to this to every foreign policy matter that Trump's been involved with, whether it's the 12-day war or the Maduro raid. They're like, oh, okay, well, how does that affect me? If they feel it doesn't affect them, they're not going to give a shit. And we've realized this from Obama onwards, is that we were able to do intervention in Libya without any real repercussions in America because we had no casualties. There was no cost up until Benghazi, and then a migrant crisis started with Europe. But once again, a lot of Americans didn't feel that affected them. And this is not saying a good thing. And then our intervention against ISIS few casualties, we're taking out dangerous terrorists, had no repercussions in American elections or American electorate. Trump's Syria strikes and the Soleimani strikes didn't affect Americans at all because, like, what it affected. And also people forgot about that they killed Soleimani due to COVID and other things that happened in 2020. The Ukraine war, that actually did somehow affect, but more for the Democrats because there's this wave of support for the Ukrainians, which maybe wasn't so wise, but Americans didn't care about the billions that we're sending over there because they feel it didn't affect them. And then they were convinced of arguments by a lot of these defense contractors that it's good for the American economy. It's employing Americans for us to build all this stuff for the Ukrainians and send it over there. And now we're witnessing that, is that American leaders, both Republicans and Democrats, have realized that there's no real cost to Americans. They'll be fine with the foreign interventions. The polling shows that Americans are not, probably for good reason, that excited for the strikes. But as long as it doesn't personally affect them, this isn't going to matter for elections, and they're just going to shrug their shoulders, and they're likely going to forget by November. But there's a big but. If it begins to affect them, and I would say 100 or more American casualties are dead, and gas prices skyrocket, and we see gas lines and there's economic disruptions, then Americans will care, and Trump will pay the price Trump and Republicans will pay the price during the midterms. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. So that is my takes on that, on the strikes. Gillis and Jory was wanting to know who's the last president who would have had the balls to do something like this. Probably never, actually, because we generally didn't do these targeted strikes on serious world leaders before. It's probably really just Trump, but it's American power is at a unprecedented level of just strength. I mean, we couldn't have done this during the Cold War, and we couldn't have done this prior to the World Wars. So it's probably just really with Trump. He's benefiting with the massive amount of power that America has on a global stage. So we'll go with his second question. He said, I saw a theory that the foreign policy actions in both Venezuela and Iran are part of a larger objective to starve China of oil. Do we think this is a sign that the great power conflict we're in is going to escalate in the years to come? I don't believe that. It's not about China. I mean, it's another thing to throw in to defend it. This is about Trump feeling that Iran is a deadly threat, and he wants to show that he's tough and aggressive and can do things against foreign enemies. But it has more to do with Israel and Middle East. I don't think it has much to do with China. They do see them as part of China thing, but I don't think this is about starving China of oil, because most likely they're seeing with the new regime that they're having, whatever regime they're going to have, they're probably going to provide oil to China. That's it. So I don't think that's going to actually starve China of oil. And I think that's going to be a bridge too far in the negotiations for us to, we're like completely disassemble your nuclear projects and also stop selling oil to China. We're not going to get a deal with that. So I don't think I don't think China's playing a role at all. I think people just want to throw it in there because they're imagining that we're now in a new Cold War with China and they're backing all these shitty third world countries. But China's just not backing anyone. China's a terrible ally to have. They never back anyone. They're extremely risk averse, and they don't risk their neck for anything. They're doing hardly anything to help Russia. They did nothing to help Maduro, and they might be doing something for Iran. There is reports that they're helping them out with satellite imagery and positioning American bases and air power and other things. There are reports of that. But that's all they're going to do. They're not going to really help out Iran. And some people who are worried that World War III is going to happen, is like Russia and China are going to get in. It's like China doesn't risk their neck for anyone. China is never going to risk their neck for anyone. Like people say America's a bad ally. China's even worse about coming in and helping anyone. They don't help anyone. Everything is narrow, solely focused on them. And they have, even Iran's been leery of having a lot of dependency on China and having all these economic investment from China, because they realize, like, not only does China get greater control of the country, they're not going to help them in times of crisis. It's like you can look at that Russia, and Russia's not going to come help either because Russia didn't do anything to help Assad because all their resources are tied up with Ukraine. They're focused on Ukraine. They don't have the ability to help Iran. Russia is more inclined to help its allies. I mean, they did a lot they saved Assad, but they don't have that ability to do that anymore due to the Ukraine war. So I don't think I don't think it's part of a great power conflict with China. It's more about Israel and the Middle East, and more about nuclear arms with Iran, which still is an American objective. It's something that we share with both Israel. Sometimes we can have aligned interests, but it's also about what Israel sees its main problem as Iran right now. And we also view them as a problem, and that's why we're taking them out. The China thing is just a way to sell it to another way to sell it to American right-wingers, but I don't buy it. James had some questions. I'm trying to think of what is... Well, he had a question is like, has the anti-war right lost its marbles when it comes to the Israel thing? I would say they're a bit too focused on Israel above all other things when it comes to losing their... I don't know what you mean by losing their marbles on a specific thing. I think it's necessary if this leads to a catastrophic foreign policy failure for America, then they're vindicated. So I don't with this matter. So I think it's too far to say that they've lost their marbles. Prior to this, I think they were too focused on these things because they're everyone who's like very concerned about Israel, for the most part, there's been exceptions, Fuentes and a couple of other people, but a lot of people who were Israel's become their main issue is that they were on the wrong side of the ICE shootings, were on the wrong side of the Maduro raid, are relishing the idea of Democrats coming to power because apparently that'll help the anti-war right. Democrats are going to still do the same things that they hate, meanwhile pushing DEI and wokeness, so I don't know how that's a win. So I think that they've become too fixated on this to the neglect of any other issues. A lot of them. Not everyone, but a lot of them have. And it's also turned a lot of them into anti-American people. They're just like, burn America, kill Zog bots, blah, blah, blah. This is what some of them have gotten into. So when you become, I think, I'm an Israel critic. Even though people think I'm not, I am. I've criticized Israel long before it was popular. I got doxxed for criticizing Israel and criticizing Jewish influence and pushing mass immigration to Europe. And I was doing this, under my own name and in pseudonyms long before all these people were here. But, if you're not, there's a demand that this becomes your sole issue to the detriment of anything else. And I think that's an idiotic position to take. His other question is he's talking about National Review's Dan McLaughlin, talking about how he would laugh at us from the gulag when we're a stain on President for Life's AOC's tank treads. I think what he's getting at is the worry of the old conservative guard of setting precedents. This was much of their excuse for not doing anything. My question is, how do these guys expect to get the policies they want? We point out the online rights problems with winning, but how do these guys expect to win with their methods? It depends on what he's talking about with these guys helping AOC for life. Some of it is like an aggressive immigration policy that, that's going to help AOC. You can't do that, and that's stupid. Sometimes you do need to do aggressive policies. There is a problem with I'd have to see what the context of this is. One thing I do have to say is that if you're talking about a tweet, if it's not my tweet, then please send it. Please send the tweet. So I'm not quite sure what the context of this is here, of what issue is primarily responding to. There is a problem with setting precedents, which I've been saying with people is like, look, Like, people are like, oh, they've already set precedents, and that's why we just should round up all Democrats and Antifa over Charlie Kirk shooting. It's like, look, you have to have an actual action to charge them with. And you have to, and with January 6th, which I think was wrong, and they went over their skis with that, there was an action that they had committed. They had gone into Congress, and then they said it's a crime. With us, we didn't even have an action that we could tie them into. We're like, we need to arrest them and charge them with crimes. And this is and we wanted to do this when we're already struggling to convict or even hold up charges against people where we actually have acts and crimes that they've committed. So I think you're setting a precedent that they could just like arrest us for, I don't know, being racist. They'll set racism as a crime, and then they'll just round up people. I mean, they're definitely going to declare racism or white nationalism a domestic terror threat, which was always something to worry about by us declaring Antifa a domestic terror threat, but it's more of a rhetorical flourish. Foreign, specifically listing specific foreign groups as terror groups comes with specific actions. So when you declare them a foreign terror group, that means that that restricts them banking, the travel. There's a lot of things that comes with that. With the domestic terror, it's more just a domestic policy prerogative. But they're certainly going to focus on this and create problems for the right with arrests and stuff. I'm not sure if that was what he's replying to. AOC is not going to be president for life. They're not going to have the ability to implement the type of dictators they want. I do think that there is a problem where they say we can't do certain actions we want, like an aggressive immigration policy, because like, well, what if Democrats come into power? There is a problem with like being a little too eager to arrest political enemies on flimsy charges. And we can't say, well, this is punishment for J6, but Democrats are going to have much greater power and ability to do these type of arrests, and they're already pledging to do this and go after corporations. And I imagine that this is actually a response to the Paramount Warner Brothers deal, but they already have Democrats openly relishing that they're going to go after any corporations and any entities that worked with Trump. But they might have already started to do that. And a lot of these corporations and entities, it's not like they're doing anything unprecedented. It's simply that they're complying with Trump's directives on DEI or immigration, as they should. And then Democrats are like, well, when we get power, we're going to make sure you pay a price for that. So sometimes you just have to do those things. Like, if you're implementing DEI and you're trying to prevent Netflix, which is from the wokest entertainment companies, from owning an even bigger chunk of the entertainment market, it's fine to utilize the power you have to prevent that. At the same time, you should be leery of trying to arrest people on flimsy charges, and then when they come to power, they can do the same thing, but they're going to have a greater success rate. Let's see. So Nitro had Nitro, and I think someone else, Renown, also had my questions on the dispute between the Department of War and Anthropic, and wondering what's going on there. From what people I've asked is that Anthropic is trying to look into the future, or trying to set itself up for the future. They expect the Democrats are going to come to take power, and they're leery of, I'm using leery a lot, but they're not wanting to be fully associated with the Trump administration. And what their contractual dispute is, they're trying to claim like, oh, they're wanting us to have killer robots that just kill civilians, which is apparently not true. They made hay out of that as a part of a PR move to say, like, we're one of the good tech companies. We're one of the woke ones. We're not like these other tech companies that are rushing in to support the administration. But then the administration overreacted and, put that they're a risk to supply chain in this ban, which may have been a little heated, but it was in response to Anthropic being intentionally difficult in order to boost their public reputation. And so that is what I've gathered from it. It's with Renown was asking with picking another fight with for the upteenth time. It's not that they picking a fight. From what I'm told, it's Anthropic that was interested in this fight and being difficult. Now, Anthropic didn't ask for the over-the-top response for the administration, but they were looking to be a difficult partner for the administration to promote themselves with Democrats in the future. And their leaders are very still committed to wokeness and leftism, more so than a lot of the other tech guys. I mean, a lot of these guys were extremely leftist and wokeness, but they now know it's good for their business interests to move away from that. So they're singing a different tune, but Anthropic's people are not. So Anthropic picked the fight, and maybe Trump administration didn't quite do the proper response, but they've now moved to OpenAI to be their replacement. And it wasn't even that big of a contract. It wasn't, something that, the Department of War was extremely keen on, that was like essential to Department of War activities. But Anthropic wanted to make a big deal out of it. They're like, we're not going along with this like other tech companies. And we see what happened with the results. So both them, Nitro and them, asked about this. And Nitro made note that they're a very left-wing company, which is true. So we will see with that. No New England refugee question today of all the people. So we'll see if they come back for the mailbag. Charles asked a question, which unfortunately I missed last week. He said, how wise that despite the online right's small size and oftentimes hysterical fits, that the admin seems to listen to us and parrot some of our ideas, if not actually implement them. Is the online right important enough for the admin to take us seriously, or is it more of a coincidence when they do things we like? It's that the new way of conservative media is extremely online, is extremely heavily influenced by the online right. We live on X, and this is where a lot of administrator staffers and where they get their news and information and opinions on. They get it from X, and online right has an outsized influence due to that. Now, people then mistake that outsized influence due to our prevalence on social media with being representative of a mass constituency, which we don't have. We punch well above our weight thanks to online social media and our influence over most conservative media now. Because conservative media, like if you look at Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, what The Blaze is doing, they're taking ideas from us. And even I go and visit my old website, Daily Caller, it's very much more influenced by the online right now than it was in the past. In the past, they would have fired you and called you an evil loser. They didn't fire me, I was already gone. But, they condemned me. But now they take all these ideas that I got doxxed for, was ahead of the curve on, and now they're parroting them. So conservative media and even a lot of the institutions are much more influenced by the online right. And this is where Republican Party and the Trump administration is getting its ideas. And it wants to be seen as popular online right. They see that it potentially help them in the 2024 election. So they want to cultivate this support base. But that doesn't mean that we represent a huge chunk of voters, which a lot of people want to imagine that we do, and then we could just turn on the admin and then make them pay a price, and that would be well represented in at polls and ballot box, but it's not, because we punch well above our weight. As I always like to say, is we don't have a mass constituency, we don't have money, and we don't have organizational ability. Is that anytime people try to organize something, it falls apart in embarrassing fashion. So what we do have is creativity and energy and internet savvy and just, new ideas, and we're able to have a tremendous influence over conservatism despite not having a mass constituency, despite not having these attributes that has benefited other political interest groups. So, and the admin, a lot of staffers, their young staffers come from the online right, and they are very eager to implement these ideas in the admin. And so and Vance cares a lot about this. Rubio cares about it, not as much as he did, but still to an extent, and some of the people around Rubio cares about it. Noam is more focused on Fox News, but a lot of the young staffers, it's like why they keep appropriating our memes for their social media pages. where they're turning to for ideas and energy and memes. They turn to us, and that creates a lot of influence. But it is limited by the fact that we don't have a mass constituency, and the majority of MAGA voters, when forced to pick between, or not forced, but when having to pick between Trump and the online right, they go with Trump. So, Silly Billy asks, have you done your yearly pilgrimage as a white man and went skiing this year? I have a confession. I don't ski. So I have not done that. I do support skiing if you do it, but I just didn't grow up doing it. My family didn't take us skiing. It wasn't as big in the South when I was growing up. People would go, but because there were places in the Appalachian Mountains where people could go ski and elsewhere, but it wasn't as big of an activity in my areas of the South. I know that's probably different now. So I support skiing. I salute those who do it, but I don't engage in it. And generally with, if I'm going to do, relaxing travel activities in the winter, I'm going to go somewhere warm. I guess it's the true Southerner in me is I don't like, bitterly cold weather. I mean, I'll put up with it more than other people. If it's 10 degrees, I will walk outside and other things. But if I'm wanting to, do some type of relaxation, I'll try to go to the beach rather than go to the skiing. So, but I support it. I endorse it. If you do it, I am into it, but I don't ski. So sorry to disappoint those who are into it. We've got we've got 3 questions from Mark. Well, I always say, I have to make this point, it's 2 questions, but his one question, they're pretty quick questions. So I don't want to make any more exceptions, but I do need to say this is generally you should strive for 1 for the regular episode and then 2 for the mailbag. If you have 3 really good ones, we'll accept 3 mailbag. But I might save his 3rd one for the mailbag. We'll see on time. But I have to get to this one from K-Max. K-Max sent an all-time K-Max question today. He says he realized that I got more. He's been asking a lot about doing IQ supplements, and I went off on him, or maybe did not went off on him, but I was a little bit peeved by him continuing to ask for IQ supplements on a specific request. And I said that, people request all these IQ supplements all the time, but then they forget that most of the audience isn't going to be fans of them. And he's like, well, why don't you do a movie review? So he suggests the movie Philadelphia. And then I guess he got something from ChatGPT on the description of it. Which, if you guys don't know, Philadelphia is from the early 90s. It's about a gay lawyer who gets AIDS, Tom Hanks, and he has to get help from a black lawyer to represent his case. Maybe it's relevant because it reveals early 90s attitudes around this stuff, but I generally don't find the gay stuff as interesting as the race stuff and views on AIDS. And it's a real middle brow, cheesy, heavy-handed drama. I don't think there's enough for me to say on an IQ supplement. If I watch it again and I find that there's some aspects about it, I would do it. I think what would make more sense if I'm going to do something about gay films or films depicting it is stuff from the late 2000s, early 2010s. I think the Adam Sandler, Kevin James movie, I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry. I think it's Chuck and Larry. It's a really stupid, horrible movie, but it's very indicative of how the general public was viewing this matter prior to the legalization of gay marriage. And both James and Adam Sandler voted for Trump and are considered conservative actors compared to the rest of them. And they did a whole pro-gay marriage movie, which in the movie, they're like 2 firefighters that in order to get health care or something, they marry each other. I haven't seen it in 15, 20 years or whenever it came out. I think it came out in 2008. So that would be a little bit more interesting to depict, even though it's a very stupid movie. I'm not saying out of hand I'm going to do Philadelphia, but probably not. Now, what makes this the most K-Max is he suggested I should start doing Pride Month specials. He said maybe this one would be good for Pride Month, which is in June. which I didn't know. Well, thanks for letting us know when Pride Month is. I have to let you know we're not going to be doing any Pride Month specials. I don't think our audience, the last thing I need to do is to have Pride Month IQ supplements. Everyone would fucking hate that, and everyone would be calling me gay if I did that. So why the fuck would I have Pride Month specials? Like, let's think before asking, requesting these things. Like, I don't want to celebrate. The reason why I do Black History Month is it's built into our culture, and it is a new tongue-in-cheek way to say, like, as like a race realist podcast, to have Black History Month specials because everyone else is focusing on that. Pride Month is a little bit different. If you're celebrating Pride Month with podcasts, you are celebrating that month. You're not wanting to be a part of that. So we are not having any Pride Month specials. And it's very different. Like, no one's going to think I'm black for doing Black History Month specials or endorsing the black cause. But, when you're like, wow, happy Pride Month, we've got podcasts for you. I don't think that is a lot. I think a lot of times, some people are requesting me to lose even more of my audience with these IQ supplements. So this takes the cake for IQ supplement requests, where it's like, Scott, we want you to lose more subscribers by our take. And I think asking for Pride Month specials might not be. It is at the top of concerning IQ supplement requests. So, but the movie itself, probably not. But I mean, it depends. It's not like when I watched A Big Chill recently, I was not planning on doing an IQ supplement on it, but then I realized how boomer it is, so then I did an IQ supplement on it. If I watched it and there was something for me, I felt I could talk about this for 45 minutes, maybe, but I don't think I could talk about it for 45 minutes. So we'll go to Mark now. Mark, his first question is, in your Obama IQ supplement, mentioned that he isn't really culturally black at all and shared nothing in common with most black Americans. If, say, Obama was half Asian or half Hispanic or something else, but had a similar upbringing in the same maternal family to what he had in our lifetime, plus the same IQ and political talent, what would he have been like? Would he have gone places or been as successful, but is basically an entirely different politician? Would he have been leaned into his ethnic identity much? He probably wouldn't have been as successful as a politician. No, being black, but being a white guy in a black guy's body, or not a really white guy, but being a non-black guy, I'm very close to being a white guy in a black guy's body, really was beneficial to him as a politician in the 90s and 2000s. It was unique. He had to have been black to have had as much success as a politician. Being multicultural, multiracial, and having that background, he probably would have been successful as a lawyer, law professor. Maybe he could have gotten a congressional seat, but likely not, because he would have been, his traits that were beneficial for him as a black politician as being, smart, articulate, being like a black guy, the white people be like, hey, he's just like us. That doesn't really benefit you if you're multiracial and non-black and not seen as black. So he would have not been this messiah-like politician, but he could have still been, maybe in a suburban area, maybe if he had specifically chosen. He would still have been successful in America, but he would have never been president of the United States and would have probably never been a senator. He had to have been black in order to have had as much political success as he had, because whites were eager for that type to emerge, and he also had a natural political base that would support him simply because he's black. And there's not that case for any other ethnic group in the same way. So second question, if Jasmine Crockett wins against Tallarico, what does this mean for the 2028 primary? Oh, yeah. No, if Crockett wins, she is likely going to run in 2028. It doesn't matter if she loses the Senate race. She is going to, I think she'll run. And she'll be a competitive candidate. If South Carolina is the first primary, I would think she has a strong chance of winning. She's a much more appealing candidate to black voters than Kamala and Wes Moore. So, and if Paxton is who she's running against, she's only going to lose by a small margin. So and Beto O'Rourke ran for president after losing against Ted Cruz. So losing a competitive Senate primary in Texas is actually a boost to your political career. So I think Crockett would she would make a run. I don't think Tallarico will make a run. There's going to be there's going to be like 20 Tallaricos running in the 2028 primary. I don't think he's going to run, but Crockett would run. Tallarico has a better chance of winning. I don't think Crockett will win, no matter who she's voting for, running against. But Tallarico could potentially win against Paxton. So she would absolutely run in 2028. And Kamala endorsed her with 2028 in mind because she knows she's got to win over black voters. And she knows that if she endorses Crockett and Crockett doesn't win the primary, she's going to go out and campaign for her. Or if she even loses the Senate race, maybe she decides not to run, but she will go out and be a surrogate for Kamala Harris. So that's smart, and she'll get black voters for Kamala. But I think she might as well just challenge Kamala. She's a better politician, more interesting politician than Kamala, and has a better way with winning over black voters than her. Might as well run. I need to make a point. We're gonna save the third question for the mailbag. I can't bend the rules anymore. So we're gonna the third one will be for the mailbag. So we will return to that. Let's see. Let's double check to make sure we've got everyone. Michigan engineer just sent a comment on an article. So I think we're just down to Mr. L.K. Rurik. I'll do one double check to make sure we didn't get anyone. We didn't miss anyone. So, yep, we will go to Mr. L.K. Rurik. Okay, Rurik's question today is, how bad is Amazon for the entertainment industry ideologically? You've made your standing on Netflix crystal clear, but I ask this because Amazon has lately produced a god-awful TV show based on the video game series Fallout. I accepted long ago that 1, 2, New Vegas will be the only good games in the series, and Bethesda will keep turning out trash, but for some reason the show is acclaimed. As you can guess, it's also chock full of subversive themes. Entertainment wise, I would say they're better than Netflix, but they haven't produced as good of shows. That's a real problem with Amazon, is Amazon seems to have lower quality shows and documentaries. Netflix produces much higher quality shows and documentaries. Amazon has not had a show on the cultural level of Stranger Things, House of Cards. You look at a lot of the other things. Netflix really sets this. Their original content is a higher quality. The issue, but the real problem is that people, I think, turn to their original content for children's programming much more. Amazon, it seems to be more content from other providers that they show on their thing. So, but Amazon. Thing is Bezos is much more interested in making amends with conservatives far more than Netflix is. Bezos sees Democrats as a problem for his business industry. That doesn't mean you need to think Bezos is awesome, but Bezos is more willing to be a conservative ally, a right-wing ally, than anyone at Netflix. And so Amazon is ideologically better, but I think that they, in terms of their ability to churn out Netflix makes higher quality content, or at least content that connects more with Americans. I've seen right-wingers like the Fallout series. I don't know much about it. I didn't play Fallout, so I don't know much about the lore. I've watched clips of it and it looks stupid, so I have not bothered to watch it at all. So I imagine that it is a bad show, but they've frequently produced bad shows. In the first Trump era, they produced some real horrible stuff. I forget if this is first term Trump or the very beginning of Biden, where they had a show about, it was a multiracial Nazi hunting group that was going out and killing all these Nazis who were apparently in control of the government. And it was insanely anti-white show. And I think it had Al Pacino and others. I think it got canceled after one season, but I'm pretty sure that was an Amazon original production where they had. If it was not, I'm mistaken, but I'm pretty sure it was, because this was first Trump term and they were the only ones doing, Amazon and Netflix were the only ones really doing, were the ones primarily doing original streaming content. But they've changed with Bezos. Bezos is much better than anyone at Netflix. they're not ideal, but you have to take what you have. So, but them turning out trash, even with better ideological content, they might turn out trash. Like Paramount's turning out all this Taylor Sheridan crap, which conservatives love, but I would probably rather watch whatever Netflix is producing than anything Taylor Sheridan produces. So that is it for this Highly Respected. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. We're going to be back with more great content this week, so be on the lookout for that. So until next time, stay respected.